There are a lot of terms in photography that every new photographer is expected to know, some of which I have already touched upon in the previous episodes, which you can check out right over here. Though in this last episode of Camera Basics, I will be telling you the top 15 photography terms that every photographer, including you, should know. So, without wasting any time, let's jump right in. There are three types of cameras: SLR, DSLR and mirrorless. But actually there are also other types of cameras as well, like 360 cameras, action cameras, box cameras, phone cameras, dash camera, movie camera, just to name a few. Anyways, let's just start with SLR cameras. These cameras allows the photographer to interchange the lenses so that the photographer can choose the right lens for their shooting needs. SLR stands for single lens reflex. These type of cameras use a mirror to reflect the light into a pentaprism, where it then bounces around and shows up in an optical viewfinder, where the user can see what the lens sees. Most significant difference between SLR and DSLR is their sensor. SLR cameras use a film roll to capture a fixed number of images per roll of film, where in DSLR, D stands for digital, which is the evolution of SLRs just with a digital imaging sensor, and so uses memory cards to store thousands of images. And just like that, mirrorless cameras are the evolution of DSLRs, just without the mirror, the pentaprism and the optical viewfinder altogether, and instead use a live view captured by the camera sensor itself and sends the information digitally to the EVF, which indeed make these type of cameras quite light and compact. Talking about EVF, let's talk about different type of viewfinders. But first, what is a viewfinder? So a viewfinder is an eyepiece on a camera that you hold close to your eye to allow you to see what's being photographed. There are two types of viewfinders, optical and digital, and as a matter of fact, there is also a third type of viewfinder that is called the range viewfinder. Though we are not going to talk about this one, as this is a much older type of viewfinder and not many or if any modern cameras use it these days. An optical viewfinder, on the other hand, is used in a lot of DSLRs and SLRs. The way this viewfinder works is when the light passes through the lens and bounces off the reflex mirror into a pentaprism, the image appears inside the eyepiece. Versus an electronic viewfinder or EVF is a real-time view of what the camera sensor sees by sending the image electronically to an OLED screen in the camera's eyepiece. These viewfinders don't require mechanical moving part as such, since it's all electronic. Hence, they are small and often found in compact and mirrorless cameras. A camera image sensor is a sensor that captures light and converts it into signals, which result in making an image. These sensors consist of small photosites that record what is being seen through the lens. The size of the camera sensor is directly proportional to the amount of light captured to create an image. Therefore, a large image sensor can fit more information and produce better quality of images compared to a smaller sensor. The size of the sensor also affects the image resolution, depth of field, low light performance, and the physical size of the camera. A camera shutter is a curtain between the lens and the camera sensor that stops the light from hitting the camera sensor before pressing the shutter button. There are two types of camera shutters, electronic and mechanical. Electronic shutter, as the name suggests, is electronic. It works by turning the camera's sensor on and off to control exposure digitally, and as there is no physical movement of internal parts during exposure, this shutter is silent. On the other hand, a mechanical shutter, as the name suggests, is mechanical and uses two rolling curtains, front and rear, that crosses the sensor to capture an image, and the gap between the two determines our shutter speed. The larger the gap, the longer the shutter speed. Dynamic range in photography is the range of light intensity of an image between pure white and pure black. It is basically the ratio of varying degrees of light source intensity and subject reflectivity, which does sound a bit complicated as it depends on the capturing device. But for simplification, just know the dynamic range is the difference between bright highlights and dark shadows. The scene with a wider dynamic range than that of the camera sensor will result in either overexposed or underexposed images. When an image is captured in a digital camera, it records as raw data. But if the camera file format is set to JPG, the raw data is processed and compressed before it saves in the JPG format. And if the file format is set to RAW, no processing is applied, and therefore the file stores more uncompressed data, which provides more post-production flexibility than a JPG can offer. But then again, great flexibility comes with great file sizes. So there is that. JPG on the other hand is already processed, and the file sizes are also comparatively small. It is also very popular, making it the default choice for most beginners. But then guys, I will still recommend you to just shoot RAW. So what is metering? Metering is how your camera determines what the correct exposure of your scene should be. Today's modern cameras have an integrated light meter that measures the reflected light and calculates the exposure. This calculation is based on the theory that the brightness of the scene should be 18% reflectivity of a specific level of gray, the kind of gray that reflects back 18% of light from the source. And based on this theory, there are three common types of metering modes: matrix, center-weighted, and spot. So starting with matrix metering mode. This metering mode is the default metering mode in most cameras. It works by dividing the frame into multiple zones, which are then analyzed on individual basis for exposure. And after analyzing all the information, the metering system inspects where you focused in the frame and then label that zone more important than the other. Center-weighted metering mode, as the name suggests, calculates the light only in the middle of the frame, ignoring all the other zones, also including focus points. Talking about focus points, spot metering mode is the mode that only calculates light around your focus points and ignores everything else, only analyzing a single zone and calculating the exposure based on that. Aspect ratio defines the ratio between the width and the height of an image. It is predetermined by the dimensions of the camera sensor, but can also be altered in post-production. For example, the camera that I'm shooting right now has a sensor aspect ratio of 4:3, but this video that you're watching has an aspect ratio of 2:1. FPS stands for frames per second. There are two ways of using FPS, for photography and videography. So today we are only going to talk about its use in photography. So FPS for photography defines the speed at which a camera can take photographs, as it is important for shooting high-speed things, like say sport, where you need to be able to shoot rapidly to make sure you capture perfectly timed images. Resolution is the dimension in megapixels that a camera sensor is able to capture. For example, let's take one of the most popular cameras amongst budget photographers, the Canon 80D, which has a max resolution of 6000 by 4000, which is around 24 megapixels. Picture profile is a menu for adjusting and changing parameters that determine an image's look. This menu allows the photographer to adjust colors and vividness of the image in camera while shooting. So you can make similar adjustment by using any photo editing software after the shoot. But then this menu helps you make them in camera. Depending on the brand, there can also be many presets for picture profile, which you can use to change the look of your photographs. Like, how cool is that? Before getting to white balance, let's talk about color temperature first. Color temperature is a physical property of light that measures in units of Kelvin. This property generally ranges from 2700 Kelvin to 7000 Kelvin, where 2700 Kelvin being the warmest and 7000 being the coolest. And white balance is the adjustment done to the image in order to make up for the color temperature of the light that lights the scene. Modern cameras do offer a few presets based on most common types of lighting situations like daylight, cloudy, tungsten, but then you can also set them manually during or after the shoot. Composition is the approach in which elements are positioned in a photograph and is considered one of the main principal components in photography, as this gives the photographer the ability to guide the viewer's eye to the main subject. There are several composition rules like rule of thirds, symmetry, golden ratio, leading line, just to name a few. Histogram is a graph that shows the distribution of light of the scene, where the left side of the graph represents the shadows and the right side of the graph represents the highlights, and the middle represents the midtones, and the height of the histogram shows how many pixels there are for each specific brightness level. Post-production is the editing of raw photographs where the photographer adjusts the parameters like color, contrast, shadows, levels to create a photographic masterpiece. And I guess that was it for all the 15 terms that I think every beginner photographer should know. Damn guys, this series almost took a whole year to complete. Though I do have plans for future videos that, if everything goes as planned, will come out really soon. Till then guys, I am Om Bagul. You just watched the last episode of Camera Basics. We'll see you soon. Peace.